Okay, good job. All right. We want to certainly be good stewards of everyone's time. My name is Marsha Ellison. I'm president of the NAACP Fort Lauderdale Broward branch, and we are going to get started with our January general membership meeting. Minister Edwards, if you could open us up with prayer, ma'am.
Madam President, let us go to the Lord in prayer. Eternal God and Father, we thank you for yet another day. Father, we ask that you would allow your Holy Spirit to be in our midst on this evening. God, we pray for every participant. We pray, God, that you would have us to be on one accord. God, that we might go forth in your great work of justice. Bless us one and all. In the precious name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Minister. We want to, first of all, let us mention, but you have to come on camera, Jazz. Happy birthday to our own Ms. Jasmine Shirley. She is our parliamentarian, longtime Golden Life member. Happy birthday, Jasmine Shirley. Okay. Somebody's in the back celebrating. Good deal. Thank you. And Yvette DeVoe says, happy birthday as well, Jazz. Um, we had most of us had an opportunity, and I think people around the world had an opportunity to review at least one of the videos from the Sunrise police arrest, choking of from the sergeant to, we're calling her, Chief Williams coined a different phrase the other night, victim cop. So we are going to be talking about the victim cop, and we're also going to be talking about the sergeant who is not the victim. There were a couple of victims here, and so we want to make sure that we put everything in perspective. We know that had any of us put our hands on that officer, it would be a whole different kind of story these days. Somebody would have to put something on our books. We had to call Gordon and Mr. Weeks and Judge Holmes to try to get us out. It would have been a whole different thing. And so let us start with Judge, if you will tell us, we know that there is a law that is on the books. If you will tell us what that says, and then I want you to tell us what's there. Then we're going to go to Lita DeVos, who is one of the original authors, to discuss what the intent was, because I know it's not is the version that we have. But let's talk about, Judge, if you would, what does the law say? And the law meaning officers' duty to intervene. Judge Holmes.
Right. Good evening, Madam President, and thank you, and to all the panelists. Back in July, or July 1st of 2021, the legislature had passed I'm hesitant to call it a statute because it has no teeth, but they created Florida statute 943.1735. And the operative parts of that statute goes under the Department of Law Enforcement and the training of officers. And I'll just cite the pertinent parts that pertain to why we're here, and that's the duty to intervene. The statute reads, the duty to intervene in another officer's excessive use of force, which must require an on-duty officer who observes another officer engaging or attempting to engage in excessive use of force, to intervene, to end the excessive use of force or attempted excessive use of force when such intervention is reasonable based upon the totality of the circumstances, and the observing officer may intervene without jeopardizing his or her own health or safety. Paragraph E is very similar. Paragraph E goes to the duty to get and request medical aid and attention for the person that just got beat up. I'm just going to paraphrase it because normally they just let them lay there and bleed out. So paragraph E says you got to get them some medical attention. Paragraph D puts the onus on another officer to intervene to stop the offending officer from violating basically a constitutional right of not being excessively beat up. So that's part of the training. There is no penalty here in this particular statute if they don't follow it, but it's supposed to be a part of their standard operating procedures. And I'll let Chief Williams speak more to the SOPs, but this is what was passed in July of 2001, that's last year. And it's very ironic that we're talking about this tonight, Madam President, because the 3 officers that stood around watching Derek Chauvin as he had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, they're in a federal trial, but there is no federal statute that says the officer has to intervene. They're being charged by the Department of Justice for violation of civil rights. You have a right not to be beat up just because you got arrested. You have a right to have medical attention when the officer beats you up. But I will tell you that prosecution is the first of its kind because it's never been tested as to whether or not subordinate officers, and it's very similar to what we have here, somebody that is a sergeant doing something wrong and the subordinates are supposed to come and stop the sergeant or the higher up from doing excessive damage to an arrestee. So we have to keep our eyes on that trial. But I will tell you, you never know what the juries are going to say. I will tell you that when police, and normally police officers don't get prosecuted for violation of civil rights because of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity says if they are doing their job and if any other reasonable officer would do the same thing, then there's no liability. So we got to wait and see, and I'm following that case very, very closely. The last time the federal civil rights violation laws were used was in 2015, when there was a gentleman by the name of, I think, Walter Scott, who got shot in the back 5 times, and there was a plea, so he didn't have to go to trial. I will tell you, Derek Chauvin has already pled guilty to violating the rights of George Floyd. So we have to see what that sentencing is. But I will tell you, a violation of someone's civil rights, if it's egregious enough, can merit and the judge can impose a life sentence. So we're watching that. But Florida doesn't have a statute with that kind of teeth in it. And there's no other federal. So you got to pray that the federal government will come along and try to protect the civil rights of the individual. And also, I will say it was used in the Rodney King case back in 1992. The officers, there was no federal crime. They were charged with violation of the civil rights of Rodney King. And 3 of those officers pled guilty. So there's really not a lot of case law that's been developed on this. And that's why we've got to keep our eyes on it. But I'm very happy and thank you, Madam President, for giving me this time to tell you about Florida's training statute. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. I will say that during the Trayvon Martin trial or investigation, that the FBI did go in. They attempted to find something that would allow them to bring federal charges in that case. And after many, many man hours and hundreds of pages of reports, it was determined that they did not have enough to go forward in that case. So we see what it is, a toothless tiger, so to speak. So what was the original? Let's go. That's why you got to have good legislators. What is the original intent of the law, Representative DuBose?
Thank you, Madam President. I know the Honorable Judge Holmes said it had no teeth. I don't think it had any mouth parts because, there's some tough gums that you could feel, but this is just as soft as it could be. I guess the best way to kind of summarize it is just kind of read you the original language that was filed. I filed House Bill 1573. But before I get into that, I just want to set out, this is typically how things happen in Tallahassee. We will file good legislation, and as it goes through the process and gets muddled, sometimes at the end of the day, it's almost like you got to take something as opposed to nothing. So that's how we ended up with that, teethless piece of legislation. But also in this process, you got to start somewhere. So, as we did last session and, sessions to come, we'll continue to try and, get some dentures together. But the original bill, you'll get a sense why it's so toothless. I'm just going to read it to you. It's written out, law enforcement officer. So a law enforcement officer who witnessed another law enforcement officer in the performance of his or her official duties, using or attempting to use excessive force against another person, shall intervene when such intervention is objectively reasonable and possible to end the use or attempted use of excessive force or to prevent the future use of or attempted use of excessive force. Here's where we lose the teeth, but these are the teeth, and they were bigger teeth. A law enforcement officer who knowingly fails to intervene in the use or attempted use of non-deadly excessive force commits a misdemeanor of the second degree, punishable as provided in the sections of Florida statute, except as provided in subsection. A law enforcement officer who knowingly fails to intervene in the use or attempt use of deadly excessive force commits a felony of the third degree, punishable as provided out in the statute. A law enforcement officer who knowingly fails to intervene in the use or attempted use of deadly excessive force that leads to death or permanent and significant physical impairment of the victim commits a felony of the second degree, punishable as provided in the Florida statute. A law enforcement officer who fails to render aid as circumstance objectively permit to any other person injured as the result of a use of excessive force prohibits under subsection or report in the manner required by department policy, such as use of excessive force, shall be subject to disciplinary action, including dismissal, demotion, suspension, or transfer. A law enforcement officer who has actual knowledge of the commission of a crime offense by another law enforcement officer while such officer was on duty and who fails to report such offense commits a misdemeanor of the second degree, punishable as provided in the statute. That was the original bill that was filed, and that's where we started. And so it started with a whole lot of teeth, probably extra teeth. And so it was such a frustrating process that several members, especially Black members, were upset about the final version. And being the leader, that I was really upset about it. But it's one of those things that it just tends to take a long time to get there. So the caucus, the members, especially the Black caucus, and our policy chair, Rep. Driscoll, and myself and many others, this is where we started. This was more of the intent and what we're trying to do.
So I'm told that at one point you were so frustrated that you thought about withdrawing the bill altogether because obviously the intent and what you got are not nearly the same thing. So tell us about your decision to just go with that so we'd have something rather than nothing.
It gets to be very difficult, and even being the leader, and people have put a lot of time, believe it or not, to get what we got, to get the toothless bill. And, that's when you're in this process, because initially, I was among the crowd that just say, forget it. Sometimes they'll gut something to nothing, and sometimes you swallow it and you feel you got to start over. But this is bigger than self. And this process is about all of us. And this work will extend beyond, my time in Tallahassee. So I was there, and knowing that it may take 2, 3, 4 more sessions, but it's a part of the process, part of leadership and understanding that sometimes your role is just to set the stage. We still have this legislation, this model legislation that we started with, and hopefully someday real soon, we'll get to the point where we put these teeth back into this policy.
Thank you. Chief Williams, you did many years, couple of decades over at Fort Lauderdale. And I know you saw lots of things. Probably never saw this because a lot of people, they never seen one officer just roll up on another one like that. Tell us your thoughts on as you viewed the video.
Well, I have two thoughts. I think the focus can't get away from the arrestee in the back of the car being addressed by the sergeant after he was in the car and in handcuffs and no longer a threat. Don't let that die down, because that's an issue as well as far as policy and procedures goes and use of force curriculum. So I wouldn't want that to be watered down by the officer on officer infraction. As far as the officer on officer infraction, I think the video speaks for itself. The young officer, the young female officer, in my opinion, and I commend the chief of Sunrise for his stance on it, did exactly what she was supposed to do. That was to diffuse and try to calm down the situation that did not need to be escalated any further. Now, granted, I wasn't on the scene. I didn't hear or see the stuff for myself. I'm speaking just from what I saw on the video. The person in custody was no longer a threat. They were secure in the back seat. And I really would like to know more about why that sergeant felt the need to go and confront the guy in the back seat again. But I commend the young officer, and shame on the other ones who stood around and didn't do nothing, who were more senior than her.
Do you think that something more than initially it was, because we think the way that the video came out, you would think that it happened like this month. It did not. So initially it was just desk duty. In your professional opinion, what could have or could the sergeant in this case be charged with?
Well, as far as being charged, again, and like I used to tell you, don't be in a hurry to see charges. There's time. There's time. You don't want to rush it because you don't want to violate any Bill of Rights. Officer Bill of Rights is something that the average citizen, first of all, doesn't have a lot of knowledge of, and you wouldn't believe the the leniency that officers get. So don't be in a hurry to see charges brought. The state attorney and his personnel need to carefully look at the video, get all the statements, and determine the best route to take on that. I wouldn't be so anxious to see charges, because a lot of times if you move too fast because of the Bill of Rights, you actually give the officer a better chance at beating it off. So hopefully, maybe they need to get FDLE. Maybe they need to get FDLE involved. And if the state attorney doesn't see anything, maybe FDLE will have a different view.
Okay, but if you were speaking, hypothetically speaking, Chief, what could he be? Could it be battery? Could it be a battery and a Leo, which is what they would have charged me with? Could it be, hypothetically speaking, any of those things?
Yes. Yes, and because he carries a weapon, it can be aggravated. Well, we got the public defender on. He could help me out with that, and him and the judge. But I think because
he's never been to police before. He's been mad at some police, but he never been to police before.
Yeah, but they know the charges. But anyway, because he's armed, I think that adds to possible charges.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind is certainly the officer says that 3 cases come to mind where officers intervene, and they were all women. I just want to put that out there. If you recall, Crystal Smith
I'm very
was
proud.
certainly
Very proud.
one to step up, and I remember Rick Maglione was not happy, and he was, and with the culture of the then police, because I don't work over it, I can tell the truth. The then police department were not happy, and I remember Maglione said something. Well, that's no big deal that she intervened. That's what she's supposed to do. However, there were several other cops around who did nothing. She did where others did not. And so the community certainly had to step up to make sure that she would be treated fairly. It's my understanding that the victim officer at Sunrise is not having good days over there. And so we certainly want to realize that doing these things certainly takes a lot of credit. Gordon
Well, let me
Weeks.
say this.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead, Chief.
The police culture certainly would object to what she did on average. I'm talking about everyday, non-political, in-house culture. She would face some resentment. That is absolutely true.
I have friends, contrary to popular belief. I don't dislike police. I dislike the crooked ones. But I do have a friend of mine who we talking about that, and one of the things he said was we were talking about the of now Sergeant Crystal Smith, who was promoted by the new chief because she is eligible, more qualified, all that sort of thing. He said, well, we talked about the culture, that what she experienced when after she intervened, and why they were the reason given for the officers and for a lot of why they were upset with her. And what he shared with me was, well, they really think that it was how she did it. Perhaps she should have pulled him aside and said, please, kind sir, can you stop and not do this? I was like, that's ridiculous. So, they thought that she should have covered for him. And I can only imagine what the victim officer in Sunrise is having to deal with, just openly, being that it is a nationwide story and embarrassing. And I hope that you all had an opportunity to see the video from the recent city commission meeting, City of Sunrise, where one of the commissioners, white guy, called the young man who was arrested a piece of shit. Excuse me to the ministers, end quote. And so the commissioner sitting next to him said, you need to shut up. Are you blaming the guy who was arrested for this whole thing? So they had gotten very heated back and forth. That's there. So there's a lot of different opinions on what happened. And, to fact, a community elected official in Sunrise to actually blame him for the violence that the sergeant took to the victim officer is just typical and incredible. Mr. Weeks, tell us what you got.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to commend the NAACP for always recognizing and being willing to speak on issues that are pertinent to this community, and more importantly, pertinent to people of color in this community. One of the things that Chief Williams pointed out was that the individual was in the car, handcuffed. Sergeant comes in with pepper spray in his hand and makes a movement, and you can see the visceral cowering away of the individual that is already handcuffed in the vehicle. And it's at that moment where the junior officer steps in and pulls the sergeant back, doing exactly what the statute is intended, exactly what training is intended to de-escalate the situation so it does not cause additional harm and exposure to individuals that are on the scene. But the thing that is troubling, and I know the chief suggested that, you don't want to rush charges. You want to make, be patient. But there are thousands of individuals that have been arrested in this community. There are hundreds of individuals that are presently pending in court right now with charges of battering a law enforcement officer. And the thing that struck me the most is when I did a quick query through our system, and I looked at the number of individuals that have been charged with battering a law enforcement officer that were arrested immediately on the scene. It is demonstrative of how there is a different way that we approach police misconduct than how we approach everyone else that is charged with following the law. And that creates a level of mistrust in the system. It creates a level of mistrust in the courts. And we have to restore that. We had an officer that, for the good graces of who she was or the training that she had, sought to interject and intervene. We saw that in the past with Sergeant Smith from Fort Lauderdale in the midst of a protest, recognized that that could be a tinderbox and intervened and de-escalated the situation. And in both of those instances, those officers are being somewhat, their actions are being diminished. We have to figure out what is going on in police culture, what is going on in this community's culture, that we are accepting of police misconduct and a different standard for police and everyone else. And that is of great concern to me. It's, I believe, of great concern to all the folks that live in this community, that if the rules apply to us, they should apply to the police as well. And what's most offensive, the most offensive part of this whole ordeal is that the union president for the police union goes before the commission and tries to chastise the chief of police for articulating the very clear view that we all saw, that that was disgusting behavior. So you have that same, intimidation attempt and factor that's once again being displayed from law enforcement. Treat us different. We don't want to be treated the same way as everyone else. We are special, and we can go and try to lay that intimidation threat in front of the commission and chastise the police for vocalizing what everybody else has saw and displayed. So, I can do nothing more than hope that we as a community stand firm and continue to demand that everyone be treated equal. No matter who you are, no matter what your wealth, no matter what your status, no matter whether you're in law enforcement, you're in the badge of blue or not, that we all be treated the same. And I think that is the power of the NAACP. That is the power of the folks that are on this call to continue to voice that sentiment. So those folks that are in decision-making authority will be forced to make the decisions that are equivalent for everybody across the plane. And that is my hope, that we get to that place, because I was shocked that the chief was so strong in his language, because we have not seen chiefs in the past take that strong approach. So we are moving in the right direction. We just have to get there a little bit quicker, because we can't keep having these instances occur. So I thank you, Madam President. Keep the pressure on, keep the conversation going.
Mr. Weeks, tell us about when you found out you penned a letter to the city, I believe the chief of police, and what was your ask in that letter?
We found out about this incident back in November 19th of 2021. I want that to sink in. November 19th of 2021. And we learned that the officer was on desk duty. We learned that this officer was not being investigated criminally. We didn't even know whether there was an internal investigation going on into whether there was a policy violation. So the letter simply pointed out, if you're going to take that same careful, deliberate, reasoned approach when looking at police misbehavior, take the same approach when you're looking at everyone's misbehavior when you encounter them on the streets, or treat police officers like you treat everyone else and act accordingly when you see probable cause in front of an officer. And I want people that are viewing this to understand that an officer can make an arrest based on probable cause, based on what they observe, if the facts that they observe give rise to a violation of the law. So every officer that was on that scene that observed that behavior could have acted. They could have put handcuffs on that sergeant if they so chose, but none of them did. Not one of them did, but one officer recognized the behavior and tried to de-escalate it. Now that there's another layer, the prosecutor's office can take a look at it and they can make a determination once the case is presented to them. But the bottom line is each officer could have acted and only one chose to intervene. And there lies the problem that we have.
And so I'm told, I read somewhere that this is at least the third incident in this sergeant's profile that is that rises to certainly this level. And so it goes back to how our officers are dealt with when they do these things, and how they are the badge. Many of them, and let's not speak. We'll not speak. We'll use a broad brush. Many officers believe that they're the badge places them above accountability, and apparently, thus far, in this sergeant's space, that has been the case. Let's think about this was an officer, and it's also a female. So, there are actually two victims here. Certainly the young man who was in the back and who was, who knows had she not pulled the belt, who knows what would have happened. I did see an interview from on one of the news. They interviewed a thank God he's former chief of police in Boca Raton, who stated that both officers were in the wrong. She, by pulling him back, it was unwanted touching, and certainly if someone just touches you in that manner, pulls on your belt, that was like a normal reaction, and that he was in the wrong for pulling out his pepper spray and then going further into the police car with this handcuffed person who was now of no threat. So let me get the opinion of Chief Williams on that. He was their news person's expert on that day. Do you, in your opinion, in your over 20 years of experience, Chief, was the young officer there wrong in her reaction or how she proceeded, pulling the sergeant's belt?
No.
And so his reaction to that.
Straight to the point. No.
And what's that charge when it's unwanted touching? What is that, Judge? It's that battery?
A battery, that's defined. Battery is an unconsented to touching of an individual without their permission or consent.
It kind of sounded like what he did with her, doesn't it? It's what the sergeant did, does it not?
But Madam President, may I throw like a wrench in this real quick?
Okay.
First and foremost, I have presided over cases where the state actually prosecuted police officers. And I have jailed convicted police officers based upon what I heard during the course of the trial. However, police officers are a bit different than the average person on the street, you or I. Sometimes I wish I could have worn my robe home when they would pull me over for driving while black, so that they know I was a circuit judge, but I had to go through the motions with them. But there are certain law or legal concepts that were developed by case law. One of those is qualified immunity. when they're in their uniforms and they're doing their jobs. And the other is the unions, the collective bargaining agreements that these police officers, enjoy working for the various sheriffs and chiefs of police. So maybe Chief can answer that. But normally, if it were you or I, Madam President, we would have been in handcuffs, and I would have been making a phone call. Somebody put something on my book so I can go to the commissary. But they are entitled under their CBA to have a full investigation, whether it be internal affairs or just in general, just have an investigation before they are cuffed and do the perp walk. So I believe that kind of answers why it was not immediately done, and why you got. But I question the training, because if this is the law in July and they're in November, he's manhandling her, for lack of a better term, no pun intended. Then the other officers standing around, where were they when the training was done? So who's telling them that the law changed? Something like. So we have to keep that in mind, that's why it's not immediate, because of the CBA and case law made by judges, not me.
Well, now let's talk about immediate. What day was that, Gordon? November what? When you initially found out?
November 19th, this incident occurred. And,
Okay.
the question of immediacy is, do you have to go through a 2-month investigation for what we all observed on that video? Is that necessary? However, there may be suggestions that there were words said that will put things into context. Okay. Most of everyone else that has an encounter with a law enforcement officer acts on the information they have in front of them. This officer has a video. Everyone saw what happened. There may be words that put things in a context that maybe better explain that this was in fact a act based on anger and trying to retaliate. Then there's something called an add charge. You can add a charge later if you find further evidence that supports it later on. The question becomes, what requires from November 19th of last year till January 27th of this year for them to be investigating? Why that level of deliberation? Because of the culture, because of that thin line that exists in law enforcement, that you give a little bit of deference to each other as opposed to what you would give to someone on the street, because he put his hands on a junior officer's neck in front of all of her colleagues, a female officer. And if you or I or any one of us would have done that on the street, we would have been off in the back of the car to the jail. So I just would like to know, what level of investigation are they doing?
Okay.
The level that the officers' Bill of Rights says they must do. That's the issue. We can't ever forget that. We get in these heated conversations and not understanding that chiefs of police and sheriffs still have to go by what state law, Bobby DuBose can speak on that, says that they must be granted to these officers. You can't just go in and arrest.
But it's been more than 2 months.
You know
So
that
that's
better
not
than I
immediate.
do.
Yeah, but that's not 2 months is not immediate. And here's why our concern is. The concern is the pattern of the Broward County State Attorney's Office has been to sweep it on the rug, drag it out, and then a year from now they find nothing. So someone asked, what about accountability? What about reform? Reform means that you put a law in place that requires officers to intervene. Reform is what all that long list of things that were included in the bill that Representative Bose read off. That's reform. And reform means that we hold our elected officials accountable, and also these police officers and police chiefs. You know, I had a conversation with Frank Adderley some years ago when those officers from the city of Fort Lauderdale, 5 of the 10, because it was more than 5, made that racist video. And he said to me, well, Madam President, you know, I can fire them, but you know they're going to get their jobs back. I'm like, I don't know that, but you've got to try. If you do nothing, you send the message to the community that you're not with us and that you're okay with them doing that. And so you have to try. If they fight and they get their job back in a year, then let that happen. One of the other things that happens is the representation and these folk that the police departments hire when they're defending. Now that is also there's mediators. That's also a negotiation point. But there's, you know, if you remember in that particular case, the city of Fort Lauderdale brought in Pettis, who certainly delivered. It was important that you at least try. Now, so I understand about the union, but we've all have seen where the officers are not held accountable. And let me ask you this, and I don't know if either which one of you know this. So if there was one of the stories said that there a criminal investigation that has begun into the officer. Do we know who is doing? Does that mean the state attorney's office? Does that mean an outside entity? What does that mean? If anybody knows, who is the agency that is doing the criminal investigation?
Normally, it's the state attorney's office, but when it's an investigation, they don't have to divulge any information pursuant to statute. That's Florida Statute 119. They don't have to tell anything until they reach whatever their deliberative process when that ends. So normally it's the state attorney's office, but we don't know if Mr. Pryor has it or not, and whether or not he will file charges.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
I understand we had a little divergence on a discussion about the police officer Bill of Rights. And this is where I oftentimes get into very heated conversations about interpretation of statute. And it is my interpretation. And I can only speak to my interpretation. We are a bunch of attorneys. Get attorneys in a room and they're going to read a statute. They can all see it a little bit differently. But it is my interpretation, Florida Statute 112.532, that this Bill of Rights applies to policy violations, not violations of the law. You know, if an officer, and you know, you got to think about why the Bill of Rights was created. You know, law enforcement officers suggested through their union that because of the work that they do, they did not want their superior officers to nitpick them or pigeonhole them based on policy violations and then hurt their career. So they asked and were then given some rights that would allow them to protect themselves if they were being investigated, because the nature of police work, it is a very fluid work. So they put these protections around when they would be given statements, if they were being forced to give statements, because you have to think about it. They are in a quasi military organization. And when your superior officer asks you a question, did you or did you not do X, Y, Z? You may feel compelled that you have to answer that. So they were then granted rights that if they were being investigated for policy violations or some wrongdoing, that they would be given an opportunity to see the investigation, understand the investigation, given counsel, be advised that they don't have to speak or be compelled because of the quasi-military apparatus of law enforcement. That doesn't apply to a violation of the law. So you're telling me if a law enforcement officer walks out of his house on the way to work and shoots 50 people, that they're not going to be arrested right there on the spot? They're going to let them go to work and work desk duty until they investigate whether that was a homicide? It is not the case. A violation of criminal statute, a criminal investigation, is based on probable cause. There's no distinction between what you do or what agent you work for. Everyone everyone is subject to the laws when it comes to criminal infractions. However, law enforcement have protection based on the nature of their employment and the nature of the structure of their employment, that they don't have to be compelled to give a statement to their superior because they're in a quasi-military apparatus type organization. And that's where the Bill of Rights comes in to protect them. And that is my interpretation. And that's an interpretation that I'm going to stand on. And that is why we have all this confusion about why do police officers get this and why did they get that? No, you got to think about how it was adopted and why did they lobby for it and why did their unions pursue it. It's just my position. If a law enforcement officer committed a crime, they are subject to the same laws that we are all subject to. And the Bill of Rights is for policy violations. We always mix into this, oh, they're under IA investigation, so everything's okay. No, IA investigation is to investigate whether they violated an internal policy or procedure within the agency. It may turn into a criminal investigation, but they are two separate things. Two separate things. They do not merge into one. And that has been my position. It's my position all along. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not a state attorney. Never been a prosecutor. I'm a defense attorney. But I read the statute, talk to a bunch of law enforcement officers, and that's how I see the statute. Judge Holmes, I may be wrong, but that's my position, and I'm sticking to it.
So, Judge, it's my understanding, and as general counsel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, please, that an internal affairs investigation does not prevent a criminal investigation from beginning. And when the IA is done, it doesn't have anything to do with when the criminal investigation concludes. Is that correct? You're muted, Judge.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's correct. If a criminal act has been done by a law enforcement officer, there is no compelling reason why the state attorney's office has to wait for an IA. That's an internal administrative thing that is done. I have known that they are progressing at the same time, and I think that's what's happening with this Sunrise case, based upon what I've heard on the news and what's been in the paper, is that IA may be investigating. And, I'm just going to throw this in, and, you had Thanksgiving and Christmas, and, so probably it's taking them a little bit time of, I don't know. I think a child could have seen the tape and made up their own decision, their minds about that. But there's nothing prohibiting or stopping both an internal affairs investigation and a criminal investigation going on at the same time. However, sometimes the state attorney's office has been known to wait to see what the IA investigation brings up. But the IA investigation is a bit murky because, Gordon, you mentioned about it being paramilitary, but there's a federal case called Garrity that says if a law enforcement officer is being investigated by his or her agency, they are compelled to answer questions and participate. It's like the Florida bar. You got to answer, you got to participate whenever somebody files a bar complaint against you. And because they are compelled in that circumstance, it can't be used against them in a courtroom, okay, in a criminal proceeding. So there are a lot of things, both made by judge-made case law, as well as, legislatures not holding officers accountable. And that's why we're in the quagmire that we're in. And so that's why it appears that the bad ones get away and they skirt by. But you know what? Nobody gets by. Somebody wrote in the comments, karma. Karma has a way of ringing doorbells.
Okay. I wanted to, I'm going to go to our legislators. Dr. Osgood, assuming that you will continue your sweep into victory on, as you have thus far, we are certainly in need of strong leadership when it comes to reform, police reform. And I don't know if you were on earlier when Representative DuBose read what was originally in the law, within the statute, and what we came up with. So it was strong, and I could see why. I mean, they stripped it. Was this the one that they just took everything out of? And put it all in one bill. And so as we move forward, we will certainly be dependent on you to make sure that statewide we have something where we can certainly compel the officers so that the next time, the next Crystal Smith will not be out there by herself. As you move forward, we will be certainly dependent on you. And if you'll share your thoughts on this officer's duty to intervene and the necessity that we have.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening to all of you again. I was doing what I do, multitask, but thank you for allowing me to be with you tonight. I think that it's something that we're going to have to work on together as a community so that we can have things, and I'm sorry, I'm getting somebody's background noise, but we're going to have to collectively work on policies together. And I'm so glad to see Chief Williams here together with law enforcement, because a lot of the systems that are in place, we put policies, but the policy does not address the overall system issues that we have. And in this country right now, we're under massive attack by the Klan and the Proud Boys, and they are getting themselves positioned in different organizations like law enforcement and different entities. And I think that's something we're going to have to discuss. And when we look at, when I saw what happened, you know, if that joker would have choked me, I would have called the police on him to have him arrested and forced them to arrest him after I hit him back. But I think that we have to do our part as well when something like that happens. And we certainly have to hold those persons accountable. But when you're in a structured system, if you fire somebody without due process, you almost 100% guarantee them their job back. I've gone through it a couple of times in the school board with teachers and people that are just bad for kids. And if you don't take the time to go through those steps, because of the way the system is set up, it's not that you don't desire to deal with them, not that you don't know that they need to get out of there, but it's a system issue. So maybe some legislation need to be brought forth to change the system, because what happens is they come back and sue you. You pay all their attorney fees, you pay the money that you owe them, and then you have to get them some kind of job back and spend another 3 months documenting them to fire them again outside of that, which costs the taxpayers tons of money. So I think that these are the conversations that we need to take place. I will certainly, as usual, be in constant contact with Representative DuBose, the NAACP, and our team to see possible legislation that we could bring forward. And I'll just close by saying, if one of my kids had choked that cop, that lady like that, my kid would have been hauled off the jail from school. So it's hard to understand the discrepancies, but they are in the system. And I think we have to begin to analyze these systems and recommend changes to the way that these things are taking place in the system. Because when you're inside the system, your hands are tied. You have to check all those boxes, or you will end up with an adverse result at the end. And I know it's hard for us. I've been experiencing it on different ways. You know, Marsha, we went through it with DeLuca Roll, but we kept going until we finally got some action. But it's different when you inside those systems and you're trying to address these type of issues. But I think that we're on the right track and moving forward. And I'm certainly, you know, the one thing y'all know, y'all train me well, I'm not bashful about speaking up and speaking out. And I think together we can create some legislation, take what Rep. DuBose, you know, we can work on some things together. And then we can go to Tallahassee 5 or 6 times so that we have a large presence in Tallahassee to be able to get some of these things addressed. And I'm saying we very intentional,
Because when I look at the years of Leader DeBose and others they spent in Tallahassee, they've been there with us on the phone and supporting them. But I think we're at a different time now where people need to see masses of people of color and have to look in their face. We all over the Capitol, we paying for it, all outside, laid out on the lawn, protesting, standing together so that people know that we mean business.
Leader DeBose.
Madam President, I just want to add to Dr. Osgood's comments and expand a little bit, because she emphasized on the word we and we. And so, yes, we need to do something in Tallahassee, but we can effectively make change locally, because although things aren't on the books or they're toothless in the state and federal, but there are some departments that have taken some steps and some directions and kind of have helped us create model legislation to push for. So as much as we are fighting in Tallahassee, we can fight locally and effectively try and get some of this stuff going. So for once, we could be the lead and the model. So everyone that's listening, everyone that's engaged, a lot of this is the we, and we can start locally and pushing and agitating and causing different departments to change how they operate. And I just wanted to add that because I think Dr. Osgood is absolutely correct. But what stood out to me was we, and I just wanted to expand on how we can do what we need to do.
One of the things that Dr. Osgood talked about is law enforcement and then the system there. I just, we're talking, yes, that when we talk about firing, that's certainly one piece. And we talk about arrests, that's another piece. I want to make sure that this state attorney is doing what he said he was going to do when he campaigned. Is he the one that's doing the investigation? Is this going to be one of those things where we wait a year, half, 2, and then he says there was nothing? Those are the things that trouble us when we have that. And so I want the same. We want to make sure that accountability happens at all levels. I believe that it was also stated that in addition to the law that we have, that police departments were encouraged to certainly go far and beyond in their policies when it came to an officer's duty to intervene. We did have a question from Willie Jones. So Willie, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak, followed by Christine Jones. Okay. Willie Jones, you had a question or a comment? Mr. Jones, unmute and ask your question or make your comment, please.
Yeah, the answer is yes. One question I have, everybody has been very well spoken about what's going on. The question I have, there's several, but the one question I have, do the Policeman Bill of Rights supersede criminal law?
I think the judge answered that with a resounding no.
So if that be the case, what are we waiting for in an arrest in this case and any other case where police officers' action rises to the level of criminal violation per state statute?
I guess a question would be before you judge, has there, if for that, I don't know the answer to this, if the victim officer for whatever reason decides that she does not want to file, for whatever reason, all of the attention, all of the stuff that she's got going on, does she can the state attorney move forward? If some would say, an officer told me earlier today, well, no victim, no crime. So a question is for the attorneys, is that correct? And we don't know what the victim officer has said or whatever, but could that be a possibility? How does that play in if the victim officer says, I just want to let this go?
Well, that's certainly going to play into the charging decision, whether or not the state attorney, and we, tonight we're talking and people are saying, well, we don't bring charges. That's the duly elected state attorney that y'all went to the polls last year and voted for him and put him in. He brings the charges. It doesn't, even if the police wrote up a probable cause affidavit and arrested somebody, unless Mr. Pryor's office brings charges, then nothing's going to happen. Now, getting to the question that was asked, can this be prosecuted without her? Very unlikely. The law, as it is, the people that Bobby was working with up in Tallahassee, the only crime that the crimes that they will allow for a non-victim, a live victim to come in, is like in domestic battery cases, where the person that's been battered or whatever happened is reluctant to come in because of that familial, that relationship that is there. The legislature carved out an exception and said, yes, you can go on with the prosecution of that because there's a vested interest in the state to keep the marital estate there, and it helps the victims to come forward to prosecute. Even a rape victim, if they don't come forward to testify, Mr. Weiss can tell you, his lawyers, they clap their hands because the state can't go forward. A misdemeanor battery charge, if that were the case, and the victim officer says, I'm not coming in. Even if she was subpoenaed and forced to come in under the threat of being a material witness, all she has to do is get on the stand, give her name, and to what happened on November 19th, I can't recall. The prosecutor's gonna play the tape for the jury to see, is that you? Yeah, that's me. Well, what happened? I don't remember. I don't have a good recollection of what I said and what was done. The jury's gonna be, if it gets to the jury, before the judge grants a judgment of acquittal, then so she's gotta be willing, and that's one of the drawbacks. And Mr. Pryor has to be willing to say, look, this was done in public. It made national headlines. People from all over the United States have seen this. It's being talked about. We got commissioners about to go at each other's throats because of this. We need to do something. So it's not, everybody's saying we, and then I saw a couple comments where they're blaming the NAACP. NAACP doesn't arrest people. We don't bring charges. The only thing we do is we bring a lot of pressure to get things changed. That's why we have these forums. And I know folks are saying, well, I'm tired of talking. If y'all would get to voting, we wouldn't have a whole lot of this, because it's who you put in office that makes the determination, okay? Because it's from the top down. So you get legislators that lean towards law enforcement. All the laws are going to be pro law enforcement, where you can't touch them because it's the law. You got judges, appellate judges who make the law based on their rulings and their opinions, that carves out things that protect law enforcement officers. Okay, qualified immunity is not a law. It's a case-made defense. Okay, that was carved out by judges that don't look like us, but y'all won't vote. Okay, we have elections and people do not leave their homes to vote. Everything is a result of consequences of elections. Who's our sheriff? If he condones beating up suspects, pepper spraying them, then his rank and file are going to follow right along and do the same thing. So you make sure you get people in office that are going to say, I'm not going to have this. I will fire you if you do this. You elect commissioners in the city. When they go to hire a city manager that hires the police chief, you need to make sure that that's going to be somebody that has our best interests at heart. Okay, so we're having this conversation to educate you all on what's there, but we don't bring charges. We can't force Mr. Pryor to bring charges. I couldn't get him to say don't arrest a 7-year-old, so had to pray for the legislature to pass that statute. So there are a lot of things that are out of our hands because of the laws that are on the books. So if you want to change the law, get elected, go to Tallahassee, help somebody get elected and go help them get to Tallahassee that's going to be like-minded and think like we do. Elect judges. Judges are elected and appointed, but get them. If a judge, condones that, y'all go to the ballot. But you got to vote. You can't just sit back and say, we need to march. You can march all you want to till your shoes fall off. Okay. And with House Bill 1 still on the books, I wouldn't advise marching right now. But you can certainly vote and get these people out of office. Okay, because more powerful than a gun, more powerful than a knife is your voter's registration card. That's what scares them. That's why they're trying to take the vote from you so that they can stay in office and pass these god-awful laws. But it's not us. And I commend Madam President Ellison, because she is constantly, and sometimes I have to kind of like hold her back a little bit because she's ready to go down and get in the face of police chiefs and everything. And I'm trying to help with the laws that are on the books. So maybe Oscar, you get up there and you get you a good coalition and let's change these laws that protect bad police officers. All right, that protect bad judges, that protect bad legislators. Okay, so we have to vote. Everything funnels down to our votes. And I don't mean to get so passionate. I'm not yelling at anybody, but I'm just like, when I see the comments and things, we need to do this. We need to. We elected people to do things for us. Okay, they're our representatives, and if they're not going to do their jobs, then we need to get people in there that will do their jobs. Okay. Thank you, Madam President. I'm gonna shut up.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Madam
Madam
President,
President.
can I jump in there?
Hang on
'Cause
a second.
President.
This is going on because in 2018, not enough of us went out and voted, and we've been catching hell ever since. These things have come out of the governor's office, from his desk, and passed on to the legislature to vote, and they are just lied. That's why we got this a voter suppression bill that we are in court now, that we expect to be on Monday. Anthony Brown, who is he's my counterpart. He's Indian River County president. He's also a part of our state leadership team, who will be giving testimony on our behalf against the Senate Bill 90, the voter suppression bill. We have HB 1, who was the anti-protest bill. Those things came from the governor's desk. The same ones that y'all voted for him by not going and voted in 2018. Those are the significance. That's why we have who's heading the Department of Health. You all saw that guy is just crazy. They're gonna kill us all if we fool around with him. That is the importance of voting. And when you have, when it comes to these police chiefs, I've seen the numbers for Sunrise. It's enough of us out there to make a difference if only we would register and go vote. So if they don't do the right thing, then we would go to the ballot box to make sure that those changes take place. I heard Representative DeBose, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Weeks.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to clarify my statement. When I said we, not in regards to, I still emphasize we as collectively, we need to put pressure on these police departments. I just wanted to clarify that point where I was standing when I was using the term we. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weeks.
Madam President, I have to sit here and I listen to this conversation, I watch it unfold, and I hear the conversation about what the law is, what it should be, what's right, how we're treated, how law enforcement is treated. And then you realize how incredibly complicated this whole thing is. It doesn't have to be that complicated. And while I was sitting here listening to it, I felt exactly what Judge Holmes was articulating. The answers are with every one of us. You just got to vote. You got to get involved. You have to learn about people. You have to figure out where they stand on the issues, and you support people that are like-minded, that understand your issues, that put your well-being first and try to move those issues forward. The NAACP is doing its job. It's having this conversation. It's putting the issue pointedly, squarely to the community. But everyone else in the community has to do their job. They got to not forget. You can't forget after this moves on to the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle. We got to remember, we got short memories, and they take advantage of it every single time because it's like, oh, just let it blow over. Circle the wagons long enough until it blows over, and then they'll never do anything about it. We got to get active. You got to get registered. You got to vote. Figure out who's going to support your issues and support them. My chief concern is equality and how people are being treated in this system. And that means we got to go readdress the police officer Bill of Rights, or we have to put some supportive language in for officers to intervene. You got to put some punitive measures if they don't intervene. All that's gravy. But first, we got to make sure we get the people up there that can do it, because you heard the frustration from Representative DuBose. President, he was the leading member in the House, and had language that was strong, that would have put some teeth in it. But then you heard what came out in the end, because we don't have enough numbers up there in Tallahassee to make a difference, because we don't go out and vote and put our people there that have like-minded positions. We gotta take some responsibility and try to move these issues. So I appreciate, Madam President, for bringing this issue. I appreciate you for convening this group of individuals. It's always an honor for me to be on a panel with Judge Holmes, Chief Williams, Leader DuBose, Doc Osgood. It's always a pleasure to hear the respective issues, the insight that you have, and the knowledge that you have in your respective areas. I hope the community appreciates, but I hope that you guys vote. We got elections coming up. Don't sleep.
Thank you. Christine Jones, you had a question? Christine Jones, unmute.
No, Madam President, I didn't have a question, but I do have a statement, if it's okay. Can I make a comment regarding all this that's going on now?
Sure.
One of the things that I wasn't going to speak on this, but I'm listening to all this stuff that's going on about what the police officers are doing and how we disagree with what they're doing. But you know what? We don't come together in numbers to protest that either. I know this governor has put out a bill for protesters, but we can all get together as a community as a whole, not just you guys who's in charge of everything, but bring all of your constituents in. Let us all come and be a part of what you all are doing. Tell us what y'all need us to do, and let's formulate the numbers and go to the police office, to his chief, and tell him this is what we don't want. This is what you need to do, even if it's Harold Pryor, the same thing with him. We need to stand up. We need to stand up to these folks that we elected in this office. We can talk about it all day long, but if you don't go to where they are and tell them what they're doing that we feel that is wrong, then we don't have a voice. Then we need to stop talking about it if we're not going to do anything about it. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. And let me just say, I agree, but because you don't see us talking about it, because you just hear it now, that doesn't mean that other meetings were not held. Those meetings are held, they're simply not held in the media. We have had, I think Harold would tell you that we've had several conversations about campaign promises. I think that if you know that we have had several conversations with police chiefs. We have had, if there's anybody who's anybody, we've had conversations with to figure out where they are. And so the protest, as you all know, there is space for that, and we're not stopping anybody from doing that. But in a pandemic, the national office is not all in for doing the protests. We are going to the table. There's a reason why Judge Holmes is our general counsel. She is working on several of our boards and in decision-making positions. So are the other members that are here. So decisions are being made every day. What we're sharing with you is, in particular this instance, is that law that talked about an officer's duty to intervene. There is a process that's going on that we need to make sure that the right things happened and that law enforcement is not, they're not above the law. And wherever that is, we have to actually speak on it. So don't think this is the only conversation that is being had. We make sure that the right people are in the right places to have those conversations. This, however, we could not be silent on because of because of what's going on. I don't know this officer. She may not be a great officer, but on that day, on November 19th, she did the right thing. This is sending a message to the other officers that are out there and who will think twice perhaps before they intervene. And so, this governor has a number of other things up his sleeve that will make our lives very difficult. We have an opportunity to decide whether we want to continue on in this vein or whether we don't, because there's an election coming up. Our numbers are not good when they talk about people in the Black community. And someone said, "Well, I'm tired of voting." Then you're tired of working. That's not going to work. Whatever it is you think you're better mousetrap, go ahead and spring that and let us know how that works out for you. We've got to make sure that we are present and accounted for when it comes to voting. If you look at the last couple of elections, special elections or otherwise, you can see what's really going on. And there it is. It is not good. Let me just say that. I want to finish up with where we go from here when it comes to Sunrise Police Department. I think that what we have witnessed is a crime. I think that if it had been me, there'd be a different conversation had that I would have been charged. I don't think that the sergeant's uniform places him above the law. I know that in other cases, I know that domestic violence cases, that if the victim says no, they don't want to press that there is an option to move forward. I know that when we're seeing now that even when there are fights, mutual combatants are being called domestic violence, which allows the officers to arrest, and in particular children. And so it can be done if there is a will to do the right thing by the particular law enforcement agency, which in this case is Sunrise. But I want to get some finishing words, some closing words from leadership. Let's start with our elected officials. Dr. Osgood, who is still on the Broward, who is our school board member. Now I say that because she looks like me. We all from all over the county, if truth be told, we see her on TV and all the things that she's done. We all call her, even though some people may not be in her district. So she's everybody's school board member. But going forward, I know that you were in Tallahassee for Broward Days, that you are in constant communications with our legislators, particularly our Broward delegation. Let's hear from some closing words from you, Dr. Osgood.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be brief. I need to puddle jump a little bit. I need you, the community, to please pay attention. Broward County Schools is in the process of electing the next superintendent. Please pay attention to what's going on. Come and speak, send your emails, voice your opinion. We narrowed it down to 4 candidates. 1 dropped out today, but you need to be a part of this, paying attention and knowing what's going on. And I think as we continue to have the leadership of the NAACP and come together and talk about these things and use what I call adaptive problem solving, we can address some of these issues. It's going to take our collective expertise from every discipline, members of our community, to continue to work on these issues. We can't quit. We can't give up. I mean, we living in a time where we're still fighting. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act have not been passed. Again, as someone said earlier, please, please, please go out and vote. There is a vote on March 8th. Most people are not even aware of that, of a general election. So I'm going to also ask for your vote on March 8th. I would love the opportunity to serve as your next senator for District 33. Thanks to you, we got through the primary election with like 78% of the vote. So I need you to just show up again and keep showing up. Thank you, Madam President, for your leadership and all that the NAACP does in Broward County, in your reach across the nation with the NAACP.
Thank you, Doc. Representative DeBose.
Thank you, Madam President. As usual, these forums are great. Hopefully, this one was recorded. We are in a time where we are seeing the best of us, and we're seeing the worst of this country as well. What happened last session in Tallahassee was very egregious, but the tone has not changed. We need to keep our eye on the ball and understand that racism and white supremacy is stronger than ever before. I think it was always there, and the veil has been removed. And folks may ask the question, why the NAACP? And I tell people the NAACP is more important today than ever before. I just wanted to emphasize the partnership and all that you've done during my tenure in Tallahassee and our partnership, because although we didn't have the votes, we were able to work in a collaborative way to put the legislation in the proper posture for you and others to challenge it in our court systems. And we've seen that we've been successful in many fronts by having that collaborative effort. So I just want to encourage everyone that's participating in this forum to make sure that you are an active member. And when I mean active, pay your dues. Because when there are lawsuits to be filed, it ain't free. And so make sure your friends are members of the NAACP. So if you do nothing else, your membership helps us to continue to fight, because as you can see, it's still coming every session. And this governor that we have now, he just does not care. So again, Madam President, thank you. NAACP is relevant and very important. And I say this proudly, everyone in my family is a life member, including my 8-year-old Jacob DeBose.
Thank you so much. Chief Anthony Williams. Chief?
I'm here, Madam President.
Okay, we're doing closing remarks.
I would just say, I would like to re-emphasize what the judge and Brother Gordon Weeks said. It's bottom line is vote. That's the only thing they understand. That's the only power we can exert. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this illustrious panel you put together. And where is he? What's up, Uncle Tony? I see you.
All right, thank you. Gordon Weeks.
I echo everything that all the panelists have said. Voting is incredibly important. It is the bellwether by which you can make your wishes and your moral compass known. And it's important that we do that. I appreciate the incredible candidness from Brother Williams, Chief Williams from Fort Lauderdale. You have to recognize when you reach the highest levels of law enforcement, you've seen a few things, okay? You've seen a few things, a few good and a few bad. And to be able to stand clear and call out that behavior is commendable. We have to recognize the Chief of Sunrise for doing that as well. It takes a lot of courage. We saw the union blast him at the next commission meeting, trying to exert their pressure. It takes a lot of courage. So we have to not only call out misbehavior when we see it, but we have to support those folks that are willing to stand strong, that are going to stand in the paint and do what's right and take the hit when the moral compass requires you to take the hit to do what's right. And that is what we need to do. We need to have folks that are strong-willed, but also knowledgeable of the process and procedure, like Doc Osgood. You know, she understands the process. She understands from a very unique standpoint in education that has all kinds of intersections with law enforcement. It's an incredible, important experience that we then build on, and we need those folks to help shape what's going to go on in the future. So I appreciate even being on a panel like this, but more importantly, I appreciate the fact that the NAACP and this community care enough about having these conversations and to continue these conversations, because the reality is this is like three-dimensional chess. And folks get very frustrated when they say, why is there not a solution right away? How come I keep seeing this happening? Why isn't this stopping? Why can't this be fixed? Because every time you make a move here, there's a counter move here on a different level, and there's all these different dimensions that you have to account for. And I got to give great credit to Madam President for seeing that, along with the guidance of Judge Holm, for being able to posture a legally position to then address those moves that are occurring. So the bottom line is we are moving in the right direction, but we need the support of the good people to be in the strategic places to continue to have those advances to move in the right direction. And that only happens through voting. So I appreciate it, Madam President. And more importantly, I appreciate the NAACP for having the courage and the strength to continue these conversations.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks. Our own Judge Lorna Holmes.
I'm gonna do like the preachers do. I'm gonna say I would be brief, so y'all put my spirits a bit. But look, I read the comments, and we're not gonna be able to get to the questions. But let me just say this to you: the NAACP has been around since 1909. We are a viable organization. I can't speak for other branches, but branch 5099, that's the Fort Lauderdale Broward branch, is very viable. We got our hands in everything because our president is not, she don't sleep at night. Sometimes, you know, if people run 2 o'clock in the morning, she's coming, Judge, can we do this? So she is working, we're working. And Madam President, I didn't even bother to tell you, but I am doing some research and pulling some case law for you to attach to our letter that's going to go to Mr. Pryor's office. Because there is some case law that says that other officers and other corroboration might, but the Supreme Court, y'all know that, they're real sticky about the 6th Amendment. And I'm sensitive about that too. So, but I am doing the research once you broached it with me. And if there is a way legally that the prosecution can go forward, it's on tape, you got other officers, but the case law says, are they willing to testify as to what they saw and they heard? So that's another issue, getting them to testify. And like I said, it is very easy for a reluctant witness to come to court and say, I don't recall. You can't charge them with perjury when they say, I don't recall. But the NAACP is doing everything legally in our power to see that this officer, because it's capable of being repeated. Okay, it happened in Fort Lauderdale. It happened in Miami just a week ago. And it's the female officers that are stepping up, keeping these men from beating people who have been detained and arrested by the police. So even they are reform minded. So we allowed a lot of this to happen, okay, by getting bad people in office. But I guarantee you, Madam President is not resting. She don't sleep. And I just want to get this done and over with so she can at least take a nap, because this is first and foremost in her mind. That's why we're on here tonight. And I'm going to do everything legally in my power to aid and assist the state attorney's office in seeing the case law that maybe, just maybe, because it sends a message to other officers that we will prosecute whether that person wants to testify or not. We got a tape, okay? So let the NAACP help the community. If I came across a little harsh, I'm very passionate. I left the bench so I could do this. Okay, so I could work in the community, that I could help, and I'm doing it through the NAACP. So join us. If you are not a member, join NAACP.org. And when they ask you which branch you want 5099, because I need you. If you're a lawyer on here, I could use your help. Okay. But don't worry about it, because I don't sleep either. But we're going to get it done. We have a lot of things going on. We had the voting rights bill, where they're suppressing the vote, that's Senate Bill 90 and House Bill 1. We got things brewing with our children with Baker Act. We got a whole lot going on. And there's only one president, and she mans that office night and day to make sure that our concerns are made known to the powers that be, right? And all the boards that she's not on, she's made sure that I'm on them. And I don't mind raising hell, I'll tell you that. Y'all pray for me and I'll get saved on Sunday. But in the meantime, the Bible tells me to cry aloud and spare not. Lift up your voice like a trumpet, and show Israel, which means Fort Lauderdale and Broward, their sins and their transgressions. And that's what I aim to do. So work with us, join us, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. So you just stay tuned, okay? And Representative Bowles, you know you my baby. You know, I wasn't talking about you. Mama gets passionate when people say the NAACP ain't doing that. You know. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. I want to give my my good friend and my counterpart in the river an opportunity. I don't know how many. This will be my second federal trial that I'll be testifying in. That's coming up. As I said, I'm doing HB1, but Anthony Brown has spent hours prepping for the federal trial that's coming up, agreeing to spend so much time and being involved and standing up for the entire organization, which means all of you as well, is not an easy thing. And so I want to, Tony, if you will share a little bit about the work that you're doing. We are doing a lot when it comes to these federal trials, and having the prep is just very heavy in order to get ready for these things.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, Fort Lauderdale. I want to preface all of my conversations with Marsha, my friend. I look at her as the modern day control Angela Davis, you know, so she's out there going for the juggler. But what we're doing in the federal courts is SB 90, and hopefully all of you have tried to understand it's a voter suppression bill. It is criminalizing our efforts as an NAACP organization to advocate for votes. Our most precious and priceless right is our right to vote. And your governor and his cronies have put some stuff in, the line warming, which says the NAACP can no longer do its line warming, giving out water, giving out snacks, giving out umbrellas. This stuff, we have to do it 150 feet away because we might be influencing the voters. They are doing the drop registration now. Previously, our people could register every 2 voting cycles. Now it's down to 1. And also the drop boxes. They are playing games with drop boxes. And if it's not the elections, if it's early voting, those drop boxes can only be open during working hours in some counties. And so it is present a lot of problems for our people who are standing in Fort Lauderdale, may have to stand in line for hours. In my county, we are a service-oriented county. We have a lot of farm labor migrants who work different hours, who may not be accessible to the voting drop boxes or the early voting. So your governor and his cronies have tried to sabotage our right to vote, and SB 90 is our attack to tell them not on our watch. And people like myself and Marsha
I mean, God knows I may have done 90 hours of prep, but it's all for a good thing because this is why I joined the NAACP. I watch people like Marsha, Leon Russell, and some others. So I think that what I've heard tonight is a premise to how we get it done. And I go along with the we, but the we expands so far that the voting, the getting involved, the supporting of the NAACP. And I want to leave one thing that some of you spoke of. With law enforcement, you have qualified immunity, you have the union, you have the Bill of Rights, and you have a culture. And that culture constitutes a corrupt and flawed process. So we have to understand this, and what you're doing tonight, coming together, accepting each other's perspectives and points of view, and sitting down and coming up with a game plan, I think it'll move Fort Lauderdale. And I think the matrix that you are setting in Fort Lauderdale can work in the entire state of Florida. And thank you, Marsha, for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so you all need to know that there was a coalition of organizations that filed this lawsuit, and each one had a different point. The only one that is still standing is the NAACP's position on line warming. All the others, and this is with Judge Walker, who is certainly a friendly judge, as we would call him, has given us an opportunity. For everybody else, they're out. We're in. So we are it when it comes to standing in the gap. When it comes to HB1, which is anti-protest, I received a call from then Representative DeBose, soon to be became the leader DeBose, who said there's a bill on the way. This is how it stands today. I was on the phone with him weekly. I also work with Dr. Osgood, and as she moved around in her different circles, and there are many different groups that she is affiliated with and working in, we work to make sure that that Representative DeBose had an opportunity to share with us and to get us all in order to, because it kept changing. The bill that we have now, as bad as it is nowhere near as bad as it was when it was originally presented. And so on a weekly basis, we all talked about the changes and how we could defend this bill. And so as bad as it is now, it's nothing like the original version. And that's how we work together and we win. There are a coalition of us also working on HB1. We will go to federal trial come April. It will be another 90 hours of prep because you've got to be right, and there's no room for error. We have several different groups of attorneys that we work with. I have Judge Holmes who works with me as for this federal stuff is no joke, but everything is riding on it. So if you want to know what NAACP is doing, that's what we're doing in addition to what we're doing locally. Yes, we are fighting police reform. And the NAACP, if you want to know what we're doing, you probably should join first. The only thing that's missing from the struggle is you. But we are fact driven, and we make sure we follow the law. And so when we come to these things, and we want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, and just know that we are going to get the information and that we are going to be fact driven, and there's always strategies behind what we do. Do we run to the newspaper every time we do something? Absolutely not. Getting the work done is much more important than the show that goes on in the media. And so we will continue to hold up. And this, on February 11th, will be 76 years. Roosevelt Walters, who is also on here, has also had probably 12 years of standing in the gap. So, we're going to continue to work regardless. We're going to be here. Where are you? And with that, I think that I want to make sure I thank our leadership team and Jasmine Shirley again. Thank you for your continued work. On the 8th, there is a forum on COVID no more. that she will be hosting, and has brought in a medical doctor who can share with us, along with her own expertise, what's going on. And our certainly Ms. Ella Phillips, who is one of our vice presidents, Ralph Rachels, who is one of our vice presidents. As you mentioned, you'll hear from Bridget Edwards, who is also an officer, Alice Hughes, who is our treasurer, and Janelle Brooks. Those are the ones that I see very quickly. So we have a leadership team that is experienced and certainly that is working. But in addition to those, since we want to say who's on and who's not, because I know that you can't see who's on, members of the final ladies of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Black Policemen's Association, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, Golden Victor number 44, my OES chapter, Order of the Eastern Stars, FAMU Alumni Association, and I said the Fort Lauderdale Black Policemen's Association. If you want to know who we're working with, links are on here. So this ain't, this is so much bigger than typing something in a chat from not knowing what's really going on. And we will press on regardless. And so with that, I think Minister Edwards, if you will pray us up out of here, that would just be wonderful. And make sure that we will go through the chat. And did I leave out? Oh my God, did I leave out Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Sorority Incorporated? The the premier, but did I leave out the premier chapter president of? I see. What were you saying, Minister Edwards? What you kind of spoke up?
Kappa Alpha.
Okay, I understand.
Incorporated.
Incorporated. Thank you, ma'am. I stand corrected. Thank you so much. And yes, to Zeta Phi Beta, a sorority. Okay, now Delta Eta Zeta chapter. I hear you, Miss Sanders. Okay, members.
Madam President.
Members. Okay, you're absolutely right now. Okay. I see in the Deltas we see both.
All the chapters of
Broward.
Delta Sigma Theta are represented tonight on this call. North
That is
Broward,
correct.
Broward and South Broward. We're here.
That is correct. As you usually are. Just want to say that. So when we talking about that, we got where we're going. Also, I see Christine. We're going to get ready to pray, Christine, but also the Broward County Black Caucus is on as well for those folk. Minister Edwards.
Madam President, and to our distinguished guests and panelists, let us go to the Lord in prayer. Most gracious, eternal God and Father, we thank you for this moment, O Lord of enlightenment. We thank you for this collective of consciousness. We pray, God, now that you would continue to be the wind beneath our wings. We thank you, O God, that the NAACP, the Divine Nine, and the various organizations, our senators, our representatives, oh God, the lawyers, the judges, the preachers, the community activists who have gathered, Father, for the great cause of justice, that you, Lord, would make our vision clear. For your word simply says in Psalm 94, who shall stand up for me against the evildoers? And who shall stand up against the workers of iniquity? Allow us to collectively say, we will. And God, we thank you now as you enter into our presence and we enter into yours. We ask that you, oh Lord, as we prepare to depart from this call, but never from your presence, that you, Lord, would bless each and every one in their respective places. May the peace of God be with you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Good night.